A Hell's Angel thought someone broke into his garage. Instead, he found a girl, bleeding and begging for help. Rain hammered the roof of Jake Dawson's house like 1,000 tiny fists. Thunder rolled across the sky, so loud it rattled the windows in their frames. Jake had lived alone for 6 years, and the storm did not scare him. Storms never had. He was a light sleeper. Years on the road had taught him that. A man who rides in packs learns to wake at the smallest sound, because trouble rarely announces itself with a knock. That was why his eyes snapped open at 2:47 in the morning. Something scraped against metal. The sound came from outside, past his bedroom wall, through the thin sheet of rain pounding the earth. It came from the garage. Jake sat up in bed, his heart already picking up speed. He listened. There it was again. A scrape, then a soft thud, like something heavy shifting on concrete. His garage was not just a garage. It was his whole life kept in one building. 3 motorcycles sat inside, each one restored by his own 2 hands over years of quiet evenings when the rest of the world felt too loud to face. One of them, a 1971 Harley Shovelhead, had belonged to his father. It was the only thing Jake had left of him. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Nobody touched that garage. Nobody. Jake threw off his blanket and swung his legs to the floor. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with arms marked by faded tattoos from a life spent on the road. At 45 years old, he still moved like someone who could handle himself in a fight. His leather vest hung on a hook by the door, patches sewn on from years of riding with the club. He did not put it on now. There was no time for that. He grabbed the flashlight from his nightstand and the wrench he kept under the bed, an old habit from nights when the world outside felt unsafe. His bare feet hit the cold floor. Thunder cracked again, closer this time, lighting up the hallway in a flash of white. He moved quiet as a cat, despite his size. Years of training had taught him how to walk without sound, how to listen with his whole body. He reached the back door that led to the garage and paused, hand on the knob. Another sound. This one was different. Not metal this time. Something softer. A voice, maybe. Or a moan. Jake's grip tightened on the wrench. If someone had broken in to steal his bikes, they were going to regret it. He had spent too many years building this life, this quiet, careful life, to let some stranger tear it apart in one night. He pulled the door open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth and oil. The garage was dark except for the dim glow of a streetlight far down the road, barely reaching through the small windows near the roof. Rain drummed against the tin siding like gunfire. Jake flicked on his flashlight and swept the beam across the room. His bikes stood untouched, chrome gleaming under the light. Relief flickered through him for half a second. Then the beam caught something on the floor near the workbench. A shape. Small. Curled up. Not moving at first, then flinching away from the light. Jake froze, wrench raised, every muscle in his body ready for a fight. "Who's there?" he barked, his voice rough with sleep and adrenaline. The shape moved. A young woman, maybe 20 years old, pushed herself up against the workbench leg. Her clothes were soaked and torn, dirt smeared across her face and arms. A dark stain spread across the sleeve of her jacket, blood, Jake realized, from a cut somewhere near her elbow. Her eyes were wide with fear, her whole body trembling, whether from cold or terror Jake could not tell. She raised both hands in front of her, palms out, like she was trying to stop a blow. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't call anyone." I had nowhere else to go. Jake did not lower the wrench right away. His eyes stayed on her, sweeping over the blood on her sleeve, the mud caked into her knees, the way her whole body shook like a leaf caught in the storm outside. "Who are you?" His voice came out harder than he meant it to. "You break into my garage in the middle of the night and expect me to just stand here?" The girl flinched at his tone. She pressed her back further against the workbench leg, like she was trying to disappear into the metal. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice cracked in the middle, breaking apart like thin ice. "I didn't mean to break anything. The side door was unlocked. I just needed somewhere to hide. Please don't call the police." Jake's jaw tightened. Every instinct in him said to call someone anyway. A stranger in his garage in the dead of night was not something a smart man ignored. But something in the way she said, "Please." The raw fear behind it made him pause. He lowered the wrench, just slightly, and took a step closer. The flashlight beam caught her face fully now. She looked young. Too young to be running around alone in a storm like this. Her lip was split, and there was a bruise forming along her jaw, dark and fresh. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine." She tried to push herself up straighter, wincing as she did. "You're not fine." Jake set the wrench down on the workbench, the metal clinking against the wood. He kept his voice low now, less like a threat, and more like a man trying not to spook a wounded animal. "That arm is bleeding pretty bad, and you're shaking so hard I can hear your teeth." Her eyes searched his face, wary and calculating despite her exhaustion. Jake had seen that look before, on riders who'd been burned too many times to trust an open hand. "Why do you care?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Jake admitted. "But you're bleeding on my garage floor and I can't just leave you there." She studied him a moment longer, then seemed to deflate, the last bit of fight draining out of her shoulders. "Someone was following me," she said quietly. "I ran through the woods for hours. I saw your garage light off in the distance and the door was open. I thought if I could just hide somewhere, just for a few hours, until it was light out." "Following you? Who?" She shook her head, lips pressed tight. "I can't explain everything right now. Please, I just need somewhere safe, just until morning." Jake studied her for a long moment. Thunder rumbled outside, softer now as the storm began to drift away. He thought about all the reasons he should call the police right now, and let them sort this out. He thought about the years he'd spent keeping people at a distance, protecting the walls he'd built around himself so tight that nothing could get in and hurt him again. But he also thought about his own daughter, if he'd ever had one, out there alone and scared in the rain. "All right," he said finally. "Come inside. Let's get that arm looked at." She hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand like she wasn't sure it was real. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jake said. "Name's Jake. Jake Dawson." "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Brooks." He helped her to her feet, careful with her injured arm, and guided her through the back door into his kitchen. The warm light inside made her injuries look worse, the blood darker, the bruises more vivid against her pale skin. Jake pulled out the first aid kit he kept under the sink, more out of habit from his riding days than anything else, and set to work cleaning the cut on her arm. She winced, but didn't pull away. "This is going to need stitches eventually," he said, wrapping a clean bandage around it. "But this'll hold for now." He made her a plate of whatever he had in the fridge, leftover chicken and bread, and set it in front of her. She ate like she hadn't eaten in days, hands trembling around the fork. "You said someone was following you," Jake said, sitting across from her. "Why?" Emma looked up, her eyes tired but steady. "I'm looking for my mother," she said. "She disappeared 8 months ago. I think someone doesn't want me to find her." Morning light came through the garage windows in gray strips, weak and thin after the storm. Jake had not slept much. He had spent most of the night sitting in the old chair by his bedroom window, listening for footsteps that never came, thinking about the girl asleep on his couch with a bandage on her arm. By the time he came downstairs, Emma was already awake, sitting up with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the cold fireplace like it held answers. "You're up early," Jake said. "I don't sleep much anymore." Her voice was rough, scraped thin from exhaustion. "Haven't in a while." Jake set a cup of coffee down on the table in front of her, then sat across from her with his own. The kitchen light made her look even younger than she had the night before. 20 years old, maybe. Definitely no older. Too young to have that kind of tired sitting behind her eyes. "All right," he said. "Storm's over. Sun's up. You said you'd explain things once it was morning." Emma wrapped both hands around the coffee cup like she needed the warmth of it to steady herself. She didn't look at him right away. "My mom's name is Claire," she said finally. "Claire Brooks. 8 months ago she disappeared. No warning. No note. She just didn't come home from work one night, and I never saw her again." "You call the police?" "Of course I did." Emma's jaw tightened. "They looked for a few weeks, said there was no sign of foul play, no evidence anybody had hurt her. They said maybe she just left, started over somewhere new." She shook her head hard, like the memory of hearing that still made her angry. "But my mom wouldn't do that. She wouldn't just leave me, not without a word." Jake said nothing, just let her keep talking. He'd learned a long time ago that people needed silence, sometimes more than questions. "She worked as a researcher," Emma continued. "Contract stuff, mostly. But right before she disappeared, she'd been digging into a company, Blackridge Industries. She wouldn't tell me exactly what she found, just that it was bad, real bad. She said some people had been getting hurt because of decisions this company made, and she was trying to prove it." "Blackridge," Jake repeated. The name sat strange in his mouth, familiar in some distant way he couldn't place yet. "She got quiet the last few weeks before she vanished," Emma said. "Careful, like she was scared of something. Then one day she just wasn't there anymore." Her voice cracked on the last words. She pressed her lips together and looked down at the coffee. "And last night?" Jake asked gently. "Somebody was following you." "I've been looking for her ever since," Emma said, quietly, trying not to draw attention. "But 2 days ago I found some old files of hers, stuff she'd hidden before she disappeared. I think somebody found out I had them. A car started following me. I ran. I didn't know where else to go." Jake studied her face for a long moment, weighing the truth of it. He'd spent enough years around liars and cheats to know the difference between a person spinning a story and a person too scared to make one up. Emma wasn't lying. He was sure of that much. "You said you found files," Jake said. "You still have them?" Emma nodded and reached for the small backpack she'd carried in with her, soaked through from the storm, but still holding together. She dug through it carefully, past a change of clothes and a water bottle, until her fingers found a folded photograph, worn soft at the edges like it had been touched 1,000 times. She held it out to him. "This was in one of the folders," she said. "It's the only picture I have of her from back then." Jake took the photograph and looked closer. A woman stood beside a large delivery truck, smiling faintly at whoever held the camera. Behind her, painted across the side of the truck, was a logo. Faded, but still clear enough to read. Jake's chest went tight. He knew that logo. He'd seen it 100 times years ago, painted on trucks his old motorcycle club used to run alongside on long hauls down the interstate. Jake set the photograph down on the table, like it had suddenly grown too heavy to hold. "Where did you find this?" he asked. His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "In her files. Why? Do you know something?" Jake didn't answer right away. He looked at the logo again, the faded red letters on the side of the truck, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He hadn't seen that logo in years. He hadn't wanted to. "I might have," he said finally. "Long time ago? But that's not something I'm ready to talk about yet." Emma leaned forward, some of the exhaustion in her face replaced by a spark of hope. "But it could be a clue. It could help me find her." "Maybe." Jake pushed the photograph back across the table toward her. "Or maybe it's just an old truck with an old logo, and it doesn't mean a thing." He knew that wasn't true, even as he said it, but admitting it out loud felt like opening a door he'd nailed shut a long time ago. Emma searched his face, like she was trying to read something written in a language she didn't understand. "You know something," she said quietly. "I can tell." Jake stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking out at his garage, at the motorcycles lined up under tarps, machines that had never once lied to him or left him standing alone. He'd built a life around things that didn't talk back, things he could trust. "Listen," he said, still facing the window, "I'm not the guy you want helping you with this." "Why not?" He turned around. "Because I'm 50 pounds of muscle and bad decisions, kid. I fix motorcycles. I ride with a club. I'm not a detective, I'm not a cop, and I sure as hell am not somebody's hero." He crossed his arms over his chest. "You need to go back to the police. Tell them what you told me. Let people who actually know what they're doing handle it." Emma's face fell, but only for a second before something harder took its place. "The police already told me they can't help. You heard what I said. They think she just left." Her hands tightened around the coffee cup. "I don't have anybody else. I showed up here because I didn't know where else to go, and now you're telling me to just walk away?" "I'm telling you I can't fix this for you." Jake's voice was firm, but there was something underneath it, something that sounded almost like an apology. "I learned a long time ago that getting involved in things like this, trusting people, caring about outcomes you can't control, it doesn't end well. People let you down. Or worse." "So you're just going to let me leave? Send me back out there?" Jake didn't answer. He looked at the bandage on her arm, at the dark circles under her eyes, at the way her hands shook slightly, even though she was trying to hide it. He thought about the years he'd spent building walls so thick nothing could get through them. He thought about how quiet his life had been, how safe, how empty. "You said your mom disappeared because she found something dangerous," he said slowly. "If that's true, and somebody really did follow you here, then walking back out that door alone isn't safe either." Emma stayed quiet, waiting. Jake ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of a decision pulling at him harder than he wanted to admit. He thought about Marcus, about the club, about all the reasons he'd cut himself off from everybody who used to matter. And then he thought about the fear in Emma's voice the night before, when she'd begged him not to call anyone. Nobody had asked him for help in a long time. Not really, not like this. "I'm not promising anything," he said finally. "But that logo. I know people who might remember something about it. Old contacts. If your mom's files connect to that company, maybe there's a way to figure out what really happened." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "You'll help me?" "I said I'm not promising anything," Jake repeated, though his voice had lost some of its edge. "But yeah, I'll help you look. Just don't expect me to be good at it." For the first time since she'd shown up bleeding on his garage floor, Emma allowed herself something close to a smile. It was small, barely there, but real. "Thank you," she said. Jake grunted and picked the photograph back up, studying the faded logo one more time, like it might give up its secrets right there at the kitchen table. Whatever answers were waiting for them, he had a feeling they wouldn't come easy. Jake set the photograph on the counter and looked at Emma's backpack, sitting torn and muddy by the door where she'd dropped it the night before. "That your only bag?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Everything I own is in there. What's left of it, anyway. Let's go through it, piece by piece. Sometimes people hide things without even meaning to." They sat down on the floor of the garage, the bag between them like something fragile. Emma unzipped the main pocket first, pulling out a few wrinkled shirts, a phone charger with no phone to charge, a small notebook with pages torn out. Jake watched her hands as she worked, noticing how careful she was with each item, like she was handling pieces of her mother instead of just clothes and paper. "She used to tell me to always keep this bag ready," Emma said quietly, not looking up. "In case we ever had to leave in a hurry. I didn't understand why back then. I thought she was being paranoid." "Sounds like she wasn't." "No, I guess she wasn't." Jake picked up the notebook and flipped through the torn pages, empty except for smudges where something had once been written and erased. He set it aside and reached for the outer pocket, checking the seams, the zippers, running his thumb along the edges the way he used to check saddlebags on the road, feeling for anything that didn't sit right. That was when he felt it. A thickness in the fabric near the bottom of the bag, right where the lining met the seam. It wasn't torn like the rest of the bag. It was stitched, tight and deliberate, small, careful loops of thread that didn't match the rest of the bag's construction. "Emma," he said, "come here." She scooted closer, watching his fingers press against the spot. "This isn't damage," Jake said. "Somebody sewed this shut on purpose." Emma's breath caught. "My mom used to sew. She was good at it. She made this bag for me when I was 12. Jake pulled a small folding knife from his pocket, the one he kept clipped inside his vest, and carefully worked the blade under the thread. He didn't cut fast. He didn't want to destroy whatever was hidden there. Emma leaned in close, her eyes locked on his hands like she was watching someone perform surgery. One thread came loose, then another. Jake peeled back the lining, and there, tucked flat against the inside of the bag, was a small folded envelope, yellowed slightly at the edges, sealed shut. Emma made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and reached for it before stopping herself, her hand hovering just above the paper. "Is that her handwriting?" Jake asked. Emma nodded slowly. On the front of the envelope, in careful blue ink, were 3 words. "For Emma. Later." "She wrote this," Emma whispered. "She wrote this before she left." Jake sat back, giving her space. "You don't have to open it right now if you're not ready." But Emma was already tearing the seal, her fingers shaking so hard she nearly ripped the paper inside. She unfolded the letter with both hands, and Jake watched her eyes move across the page, watched her face change from fear to disbelief, to something that looked almost like relief breaking through years of grief. "She's alive," Emma said, her voice cracking. "Jake, she's alive." "What does it say?" Emma read out loud, her voice trembling with every word. "If you're reading this, it means you found the truth before I could come back to explain it myself. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I found something that put both our lives in danger, and the only way to protect you was to disappear completely. I am so sorry for the pain I caused you. Please know that every day away from you has been the hardest thing I have ever done. I am alive, I am safe, and I am coming back for you when it is finally safe to do so." Emma pressed the letter against her chest, tears streaming down her face, and looked up at Jake with an expression he hadn't seen in years, not in anyone. Hope. Real, fragile hope. "She's alive," Emma said again, like she needed to say it twice to believe it. "My mom is alive." Jake gave her a minute. He didn't say anything right away. Some things a person had to feel all the way through before words could help. Emma read the letter again. Then a third time. Her thumb moved over the ink like she was trying to touch her mother through the paper. "She's alive," she said once more, quieter this time, like the words were settling into her bones. "Yeah," Jake said. "Looks that way." Emma looked up at him, her eyes still wet, but something new burning behind them now. "We have to find her. Today. Right now." Jake had been waiting for that. He'd seen it before, in men who got a taste of hope after months of nothing. It made people reckless. It made them stop thinking straight. "Slow down," he said. "Slow down?" Emma's voice cracked with disbelief. "Jake, she's alive. She's out there somewhere. Every minute we wait is a minute we're not looking for her." "I get that." Jake kept his voice even, the way he used to talk to younger riders who wanted to gun it through a curve they weren't ready for. "But listen to me. Your mom didn't disappear because she wanted a vacation. She disappeared because she was scared for your life. That letter proves she's still being careful, even now. If we go running around asking questions without thinking first, we're not just risking our own necks. We might be putting her in danger too." Emma opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Her shoulders sank a little, and Jake could see the fight draining out of her, replaced by something more tired and more honest. "I just want her back," she said. "I know." Jake picked up the letter carefully, turning it toward the light from the window. "But look here. She didn't sign a location. She didn't say where she is. That means she was being smart, even writing this. We need to be that smart too." Emma wiped her face with the back of her hand. "So what do we do?" "We go through everything again. Slower this time. Not just the bag. Everything you've got. Every photo, every scrap of paper, every little detail she left behind. People don't hide things without leaving some kind of trail, even if they don't mean to. We find the trail. We follow it careful, one step at a time." Emma nodded, taking a breath that shook on the way in. "Okay. Careful. I can do careful." They spent the next hour going through the rest of Emma's things again, this time with new eyes. Jake made her slow down every time she wanted to rush past something. He asked questions about places her mother used to mention, jobs she used to have, friends who might still be around. Emma answered as best she could, her mind clearly somewhere between the past and the hope of a future she hadn't let herself imagine in months. It was near evening when the old phone buzzed. Emma froze. It was the same phone she'd carried with her the whole time she'd been running, an old flip model with a cracked screen and a battery that barely held a charge. She hadn't given the number to anyone. She'd used it only to check a single email account her mother had once mentioned, back before everything fell apart. She picked it up with shaking hands and opened the message. Jake watched her face go pale. "What is it?" he asked. She turned the screen toward him without a word. The message was short, no name attached, no number that could be traced back to anyone. "Stop searching for your mother. She disappeared for a reason. Some things are better left buried." Jake read it twice, his jaw tightening. The garage suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in a little closer than they had a moment ago. "Somebody knows," Emma whispered. "Somebody knows I'm looking." Jake didn't answer right away. He was thinking about the photograph on the counter, the old delivery truck, the logo he recognized from a life he thought he'd buried a long time ago. He was thinking about how careful they'd been, how quiet, how they hadn't told anyone outside these garage walls what they were doing. And yet somehow, someone out there already knew. Jake set the phone down on the workbench like it might bite him. "Somebody's watching that email account," he said. "That means your mom knew that too, which means she probably only checked it from places she trusted." Emma wrapped her arms around herself. "So what do we do?" Just wait for another creepy text? No. Jake walked to the corner of the garage where an old filing cabinet sat under a tarp. He hadn't touched it in years. He pulled the tarp off, dust rising in the evening light coming through the window. Your mom's letter mentioned a place. She didn't name it, but she talked about a building where trucks used to load up supplies. Big metal doors. Said it smelled like rust and diesel. That could be anywhere. Not for me, it couldn't. Jake pulled open a drawer and thumbed through old papers, invoices, receipts yellowed with age. Years back, my club used to run deliveries for a company called Blackridge Industries. They had a storage yard out past the county line. Big warehouse. Mostly empty now from what I heard. Nobody's used it in years. Emma's eyes went wide. Blackridge, that's the company my mom was investigating. Jake stopped flipping through papers. He looked at her for a long moment. You sure? That's the name in her notes. The company she said was hiding something. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He hadn't thought about those delivery runs in 15 years. Back then it was just a job, hauling crates from one dock to another, never asking what was inside them. Now it didn't feel like just a job anymore. I need to make a call, he said. He grabbed his own phone, an old flip model, not much better than Emma's, and scrolled through a short list of contacts. He stopped on a name he hadn't dialed in years. Marcus Hale. His thumb hovered over the call button. Marcus was the reason Jake stopped trusting people. Or that was the story Jake had told himself for over a decade. But he needed answers now, and old grudges felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. He pressed call. It rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. Jake Dawson, didn't think I'd hear from you again. Need to ask you something, Jake said, keeping his voice flat. You remember the Blackridge runs? Back when we used to haul for them? There was a pause on the line, longer than Jake liked. Yeah, I remember. You still got any of the old paperwork? Delivery logs, photos, anything like that? Another pause. Why are you asking about that now? It's important, Marcus. More important than old business between us. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, There's a storage unit out on Route 9. Number 14. I kept some stuff there after the club broke up. Never got around to clearing it out. I need to see it. Jake, some of that stuff. It ain't good. You sure you want to go digging? Jake looked over at Emma, who was watching him with a kind of desperate hope in her eyes. The same hope he'd seen in her since she found that letter. I'm sure, he said, and hung up. They drove out to the storage facility as the sun dropped low, painting the sky orange and purple over the flat fields outside town. The building was exactly like Emma's mother described. Big metal doors, rusted at the hinges. The smell of diesel still hung in the air, even though the place looked abandoned. Jake used the key Marcus had given him years ago, one he never expected to use again. The lock groaned, but gave way. Inside, dust covered everything. Old crates, broken shelving, a single light bulb hanging from a wire that somehow still worked when Jake pulled the string. They searched for nearly an hour before Emma found a metal box shoved behind a stack of rotted wooden pallets. Inside were papers, old and brittle, delivery logs with dates going back over 15 years, and a photograph. Jake picked it up carefully. It showed a line of motorcycles parked outside a loading dock, men in leather vests standing beside crates stacked on hand trucks. He recognized every face in that photo. His own club, his own brothers. Standing right there in the middle of it all, younger and harder around the eyes, was Jake himself. Behind them, painted on the side of the warehouse, was the Blackridge Industries logo. The drive back to the garage was silent. Jake kept both hands on the wheel, tight enough that his knuckles turned pale under the dashboard lights. Emma sat beside him, holding the metal box like it was something fragile, something that might break if she moved wrong. Neither of them said a word until they pulled into the driveway. Jake killed the engine but didn't get out. He just sat there, staring at the garage door like it belonged to a stranger's house. "Jake?" Emma's voice was soft. "You okay?" He wasn't. He knew that much. "I hauled crates for that company," he said finally. "Me and my brothers. We didn't ask questions. We just loaded up, drove where we were told, dropped off, and got paid." He shook his head slowly. "I never thought twice about what was inside those boxes." "You didn't know. Maybe I should have." Jake's voice was rough now, like something scraping against gravel. "Maybe if I'd asked one question, just one, things would have turned out different. Maybe your mom wouldn't have had to disappear. Maybe none of this would be happening to you right now." Emma reached over and put her hand on his arm. "Jake, look at me." He didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he turned his head. "You didn't do this," she said. "Whatever Blackridge was hiding, whatever they were covering up, that's on them. Not you. Not your friends who were just trying to make a living. You don't know that." "Neither do you," Emma shot back. "Not yet. But sitting here blaming yourself for something you don't even understand isn't going to help either of us." Jake let out a long breath. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from decades of engine work, decades of fixing things that were broken. He'd always been good at that. Fixing machines. People were harder. "I spent 15 years telling myself I left that life behind," he said quietly. "Telling myself none of it mattered anymore. And now I find out maybe it followed me the whole time. Maybe I helped build the thing that's hunting you." "You didn't build anything," Emma said. "You were a driver. That's it. Whatever they hid it without telling you." Jake didn't answer right away. Outside, the crickets had started up in the tall grass along the fence line, and somewhere far off, a dog was barking at nothing. The world kept moving, even when Jake's mind felt stuck. "My mom is out there somewhere," Emma said, her voice cracking just slightly. "Maybe scared, maybe hurt, I don't know. And you're the only person who can help me find her. So I need you to stop drowning in guilt about something that happened 15 years ago, and start helping me figure out what's happening right now." Jake turned to look at her. Really look at her. Dirt still smudged her cheek from the storage unit. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but there was a fire in them too, something stubborn and unbreakable. She reminded him of somebody. He couldn't place who, not yet. But something about her refusal to quit reached down into the part of him that had been asleep for a long, long time. "All right," he said finally. Emma blinked. "All right?" "You're right." Jake opened the truck door and stepped out into the cool night air. "Feeling sorry for myself isn't going to get your mom back. And if my club really did play a part in this, even without knowing it, then I owe it to her and to you to find out how deep it goes." He walked toward the garage, and Emma followed close behind, clutching the metal box against her chest. Inside, Jake flipped on the lights and pulled the tarp back over the old filing cabinet, then stopped and pulled it off again instead. If he was going to dig into his own past, he needed everything. Every paper, every photo, every name he could remember from those years running with the club. "We need to talk to Marcus again," Jake said, more to himself than to her. "He knows more than he's saying. He always did." Emma set the metal box down on the workbench. "Then let's find out what he's hiding." Jake nodded, already reaching for his phone. Marcus Hale lived on the edge of town, in a small house with a big garage and an American flag that had faded almost white from years in the sun. Jake parked his truck in the gravel drive and sat there for a second, just like he had at his own garage a few hours before. "You sure about this?" Emma asked. "No," Jake said. "But we're doing it anyway." Marcus came out before they even reached the porch. He was older now, gray creeping into his beard, but his eyes were the same sharp eyes Jake remembered from the road. Eyes that saw everything and gave away nothing. "Jake Dawson," Marcus said slowly. "Been a long time." "Too long," Jake said. "This is Emma. We need to talk." Marcus looked at Emma for a moment, then back at Jake. Something shifted in his face, some old weight settling back onto his shoulders. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I figured this day would come eventually. Come on in." The inside of Marcus's house was simple. A worn couch, a wall of old photographs, most of them from the club's glory days. Jake spotted himself in one, younger, laughing, an arm slung around Marcus's shoulders. It hurt to look at. "Sit," Marcus said. "You want coffee?" "We want answers," Jake said. Marcus sighed and lowered himself into a chair across from them. "All right, ask." Emma leaned forward. "We found deliveries, old records. Your club, Jake's club, was hauling crates for Blackridge Industries 15 years ago. My mother disappeared because of something she found out about that company. I need to know what you know." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm them, though the room wasn't cold. "I know more than I ever told Jake," he finally said. "And I should have told him a long time ago." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "So it's true, you knew?" "Not everything," Marcus said quickly. "Not at first. We were just drivers, Jake, same as you remember. We picked up crates, we dropped off crates. We didn't ask what was inside. That was the job. That was always the job." "Then what changed?" Emma asked. Marcus looked at her, and something like sadness crossed his face. "About a year before Jake left the club, I started noticing things. Paperwork that didn't match up. Deliveries to addresses that weren't on any official route. I asked questions I wasn't supposed to." "Why didn't you tell me?" Jake's voice cracked, just slightly. "Because I didn't know what I was dealing with yet," Marcus said. "And because right around that time your life fell apart, Jake. You remember that? I watched you lose everything that mattered to you. I wasn't about to hand you one more thing to carry." Jake sat back, his mind spinning. 15 years of blaming Marcus. 15 years of thinking his old friend had turned his back on him. And now here it was, laid bare. Marcus hadn't betrayed him. He'd been protecting him. "So the club," Emma said carefully. "Was the club responsible? Were you all part of hiding something?" Marcus shook his head hard. "No, absolutely not. We were drivers, nothing more. Somebody inside Blackridge, somebody higher up, used our delivery routes without us knowing. They hid things inside legitimate shipments. Documents, records, whatever they didn't want found. They used us like a mail service, and none of us had any idea." "Who?" Jake asked. "I never got a name," Marcus said, "but I found enough to know it went high up. Somebody with real power inside that company. Somebody who could make records disappear and make sure nobody asked too many questions." Emma's hands were trembling slightly. "That's what my mother found. That's what she was investigating." Marcus nodded slowly. Then she was getting close to something dangerous, closer than she probably realized. Jake stared at his old friend, feeling something loosen in his chest for the first time in 15 years. The guilt he had carried, the betrayal he thought he understood, none of it had been what he believed. "You should have told me," Jake said, quieter now. "I know," Marcus said. "I'm telling you now." Jake ran a hand over his face. 15 years, Marcus. 15 years I told myself you sold me out to save your own skin. I told that story so many times I started believing it like it was scripture. Marcus didn't flinch. He just held Jake's gaze, steady, the way he used to hold the front of a pack on a hard ride, never blinking, never backing down. You want to know what really happened, Marcus said. Then let me tell it right, all the way through. Jake nodded once. After you left the club, Marcus said, somebody from Blackridge came asking questions, not to me at first, to the club president. They wanted to know who had been asking about the shipments, who had been poking around the manifests. Marcus's jaw tightened. I was the one asking those questions, Jake, not you. But somebody had to take the blame, and I made sure it wasn't you. Why? Jake's voice came out rough. Because you already had enough on your plate, Marcus said. You were falling apart. Your marriage was ending. You were drinking too much and sleeping too little. If Blackridge thought you were the one digging into their business, they would have come after you. Full force. Lawyers, threats, maybe worse. I saw what kind of people we were dealing with, Jake. I saw how far they were willing to go to protect their secrets. Emma sat very still, listening, her eyes moving between the two men like she was watching something old and buried finally come up for air. So I told the club president it was me, Marcus went on. I said I was the one snooping. I let myself get blamed for stirring up trouble that could hurt the club's business relationship with Blackridge. The president believed it. Word got around fast after that. People started looking at me different, talking behind my back. And I let them, because it meant nobody was looking at you. Jake shook his head slowly. I heard the rumors. I heard people saying you'd done something shady. I believed them. I wanted you to, Marcus said. That was the whole point. If you believed I'd betrayed the club, betrayed you, then you'd stay away from me. And staying away from me meant staying away from whatever Blackridge might have been watching. You let me hate you, Jake said. The words felt strange coming out of his mouth, like stones he'd been carrying so long they'd become part of him. I let you hate me, Marcus agreed. It was easier than watching you get hurt. I figured a little bit of hate was a cheap price if it kept you safe. The room went quiet. Outside, a truck rumbled by on the road, and somewhere far off, a dog barked twice and stopped. Jake sat with his hands folded between his knees, staring at the floor, at nothing. All those years he'd told himself he trusted no one, because no one could be trusted. All those years he'd built his walls higher, thicker, meaner, because the one friend who'd been closest to him had supposedly turned his back. And the truth was the opposite. Marcus hadn't turned his back. Marcus had put himself in front of Jake like a shield and taken the hit meant for him. Jake thought about all the nights he'd sat alone in his garage, working on engines instead of talking to anybody, telling himself that was just who he was. A man who didn't need people. A man who'd learned his lesson. But maybe he hadn't learned the lesson at all. Maybe he'd learned the wrong one. I'm sorry, Jake said finally. His voice cracked on the words, and he didn't try to hide it. I'm sorry I believed the worst of you for 15 years. Marcus reached over and put a hand on Jake's shoulder, the same way he used to before a long ride, steadying him. You didn't know. That's not on you. I made sure you didn't know. Jake looked up, and something in his chest that had been clenched tight for 15 years loosened, just a little. Not gone, not healed all at once, but loosened, like a fist finally starting to open after holding on too long. Thank you, Jake said, for protecting me, even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserved it, Marcus said. That's what family does. Emma pulled the letter from her pocket again. The paper had gone soft at the folds, worn from being read so many times. She said there would be more, Emma said. In the letter, she said if I ever needed to find her, I should look for the places that mattered to us. Places from before. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your mother was smart. She wouldn't leave a trail anybody could follow easy, but she'd leave one you could follow if you knew her. Jake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray afternoon. Where did you two used to go, before all this happened? Emma thought for a moment, her eyes far away. The old bakery on 3rd Street. She used to take me there every Saturday morning when I was little. And the library on Cedar, the one with the reading garden out back, and... She stopped, her breath catching. The train station, the one that's not used anymore. We used to sit on the bench and watch the empty tracks, and she would tell me stories about all the places a train could take us. That's 3 places, Marcus said. Might as well start with all of them. They split up, Marcus taking the bakery, Jake and Emma heading to the library first, then the train station. The bakery had closed years back, boarded up and forgotten, but Marcus called within the hour to say he found nothing but dust and old newspapers. The library still stood, quiet and sunlit. The reading garden out back, overgrown with weeds that had once been flower beds. Emma walked through it slowly, running her hand along the stone bench where she used to sit with her mother. Near the base of the bench, wedged into a crack in the stone, was a small, folded piece of paper wrapped in plastic to keep out the rain. Emma's hands shook as she unfolded it. Jake stood close, not touching her, just there. The note was short, written in careful handwriting. If you found this, you remembered our Saturdays. I think about them every day. I am so sorry for the silence, Emma. Every day away from you has felt like losing a piece of myself. But the people I am hiding from are patient, and they are watching. If I come back too soon, they will hurt you to get to me. I need more time. Please trust that I am close. Please trust that I love you more than anything in this world. Emma read it twice, then pressed it against her chest and closed her eyes. Jake watched her shoulders shake, and he put a hand on her back, steady, the way Marcus had done for him. She's close, Emma whispered. She said she's close. They went to the train station next. The old building sat abandoned at the edge of town, its windows broken, its sign faded to nothing but ghost letters on rusted metal. The bench Emma remembered was still there, facing the empty tracks that hadn't seen a train in a decade. Taped underneath the bench, hidden where only someone crawling low would find it, was another note. I have been staying not far from here, close enough that some nights I walk past our old house just to see the porch light on, hoping it means you are safe inside. I know this is not fair to you. You deserve a mother who is present, who shows up, who does not hide behind fear. But I made a promise to myself the day I found out what Blackridge was capable of. I promised I would rather be far away and alive than close and dangerous to the person I love most. Please do not look too hard for me right now, Emma. Not until it is safe. I am gathering everything I need. Soon I will have enough proof that they cannot touch either of us. Soon I can come home. Please believe that soon is coming. Emma sat down hard on the old bench, the note trembling in her hands. Jake sat beside her, and Marcus arrived a few minutes later, standing quiet a few feet away, giving them space. She's hiding on purpose, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. She's not lost. She's not trapped somewhere she can't get out of. She's choosing to stay away because of me. Because she loves you, Jake said gently. That's not the same as abandoning you, Emma. That's a different kind of hard. Emma looked out at the empty tracks, the same tracks she used to imagine trains rolling down when she was a little girl sitting beside her mother. She's close, she said again. I can feel it. She's somewhere near here right now, and she's scared to come home. The wind picked up over the empty tracks, pushing dead leaves across the cracked platform. Emma folded the note carefully, like it might break, and tucked it inside her jacket next to the first one. Her hands would not stop shaking. "I don't know if I'm angry or happy," she said. "Is that strange? I found out my mom is alive and close by, and still I feel like I got punched in the stomach." "It's not strange," Jake said. "Feelings don't line up neat like that. You can be glad and hurting at the same time. Both things are true." Emma pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them the way she used to when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. She chose to stay away. Every day, for 8 months. She walked past our old house and kept walking. She could have knocked on the door. She could have called. She could have done something. "She could have," Jake agreed, "but she thought something worse would happen if she did." "That doesn't make it hurt less." "No," Jake said. "It doesn't." Marcus stepped away toward the parking lot, giving them room, pretending to check his phone for messages that weren't there. Jake noticed and was grateful for it. He sat down on the bench beside Emma, the old wood creaking under his weight. For a long moment he said nothing, just looked out at the rusted rails, the weeds growing up between the ties, the way nature slowly took back what people left behind. "You want to know something?" he said finally. "I did the same thing to people who loved me. Not for the same reason, but the same shape of thing." Emma looked over at him, surprised. Jake rarely talked about himself. He kept his stories locked up tight, same as everything else. "Years back, I had a brother in the club," Jake said. "Not blood. Club brother. Closer than blood, I thought. His name was Danny. We rode together for 6 years. I trusted him with everything. My bike, my money, my back in a fight. Then one night everything fell apart. Money went missing from the club. Evidence pointed straight at him. I believed it. I didn't ask questions. I just believed it because it was easier than believing I could be wrong about somebody I loved that much. What happened? I cut him off, told the whole club he was dead to me. Wouldn't let anybody explain different. For years I carried that anger around like it was armor. I told myself I was smart for not trusting people so easy anymore. I told myself that was strength." Jake's jaw tightened. "Turns out I was wrong about him. Found out later somebody else set him up. By the time I learned the truth, he was already gone. Moved to another state. Never heard from him again." Emma was quiet for a moment. "You never tried to find him?" "I told myself it was too late. Told myself he probably hated me anyway, so what was the point?" Jake shook his head slowly. "Truth is, I was scared. Scared that if I went looking and he really did hate me, it would prove I was right to stop trusting people in the first place. Easier to stay alone than risk finding out I broke something I couldn't fix." "That sounds lonely." "It was. Still is, some days." Jake looked at her, his eyes steady and tired. "Your mother didn't push you away because she stopped loving you, Emma. She pushed you away because she was scared, same as I was. Fear does strange things to people. Makes them protect themselves in ways that look like they're hurting the people they love most." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just wanted her to choose me, even if it was dangerous, even if it was hard." "I know," Jake said softly. "But sometimes the people who love us the most make choices we don't understand until later. Doesn't mean the choice didn't cost them something too." Emma leaned her head against Jake's shoulder, the way she might have leaned against a father if she'd ever had one who stayed. Jake sat still, letting her, feeling something shift quietly inside his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. "We're both kind of a mess," Emma said, a small broken laugh escaping her. "Yeah," Jake said, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. "Guess we are." The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that hadn't seen a grader in years. Jake killed the engine of his truck a quarter-mile out, and the three of them walked the rest of the way in silence, boots crunching over gravel and pine needles. The morning fog hadn't burned off yet. It hung low between the trees like something waiting. "Stay behind me," Jake said quietly. "Both of you." Marcus fell into step on Emma's other side, his eyes scanning the tree line the way a man does when he's spent years learning to notice what doesn't belong. A hawk cried somewhere overhead. Otherwise, the woods were still. "You think somebody's watching?" Emma whispered. "I think we don't know," Jake said. "So we act like somebody might be." The cabin came into view slowly. Gray wood siding gone soft with age, a tin roof spotted with rust. A single window faced the road, curtained with something that might have been a bed sheet. No car in the drive. No smoke from the chimney. For a moment, Emma's stomach dropped. Sure, the place was empty. Sure, they had followed a string of clues to nothing. Then the front door opened. A woman stood in the frame, thinner than Emma remembered, her hair cut short and dyed a mousy brown that didn't belong on her, like a stranger had done it in a hurry. But the eyes were the same. Emma would have known those eyes anywhere. She had looked into a mirror her whole life and seen a version of them looking back. "Emma." The word came out broken, barely a whisper, but it carried across the yard like a shout. Emma didn't remember deciding to run. Her legs simply moved, carrying her across the wet grass, past the sagging porch step, and into her mother's arms before either of them could think of anything else to say. Claire's arms wrapped around her so tight it almost hurt, and Emma didn't care. She pressed her face into her mother's shoulder and breathed in a smell she thought she had forgotten. Something like lavender soap and rain. "You're here," Claire said into her hair, over and over. "You're here, you're here. I can't believe you're here." "I looked for you," Emma said, her voice cracking. "For 8 months, Mom. 8 months." I know, baby. I'm so sorry." Claire pulled back just enough to hold Emma's face in both hands, studying her like she was checking to make sure she was real, that this wasn't some cruel trick her mind was playing after months alone. Tears cut clean lines down her dusty cheeks. "You got so strong. Look at you." Jake stood back near the tree line, giving them the moment, the same way Marcus had given him and Emma space at the train platform. He watched the two of them holding on to each other like the world might try to pull them apart again, and something tightened in his throat that he didn't bother trying to explain away. Marcus stepped up beside him. "Looks like we found her." "Yeah," Jake said. "We did." After a while, Claire looked past Emma's shoulder, noticing the two men for the first time. Her whole body went rigid, some old instinct kicking in, until Emma caught her arm. "It's okay," Emma said quickly. "This is Jake. He's the one who helped me, and that's Marcus. They're not with Blackridge. They're the reason I found you at all." Claire studied Jake for a long moment, the way a person studies something they're not sure they can trust yet. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because some of the tension left her shoulders. "Thank you," she said simply, "for bringing my daughter home to me." "She did most of the work herself," Jake said. "We just helped her along." Claire managed a small, tired smile at that, but it faded fast. She glanced back toward the cabin, toward the road behind them, like she was still counting seconds until something went wrong. "We should talk inside," she said. "There isn't much time, and there's something you all need to know." She led them through the low doorway into a single dim room that smelled like dust and old coffee. A card table sat in the corner, covered with papers and photographs, the same kind of evidence Emma had been chasing for months. Claire sat down heavily, rubbing her eyes. "I know why you came," she said. "You think I have what you need to end this. to finally expose Voss and everything Blackridge has done. She shook her head slowly. But the truth is, the evidence isn't complete. Not yet. There's still one piece missing, and without it, none of this may be enough. Morning light came through the bed sheet curtain in a thin gray line, and Jake was already awake when it did. He hadn't slept much. The cabin floor was hard under his back, and his mind kept turning over everything Claire had said the night before. One piece missing. Without it, none of this may be enough. Words like that had a way of keeping a man's eyes open. He sat up and found Marcus already outside, walking the tree line again, always watching. Some habits never left a person. Jake understood that better than most. Inside, Emma was awake, too, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the card table, sorting through papers with the careful hands of someone handling something fragile. Claire sat across from her, a cup of coffee going cold between her palms. "You don't have to do that alone," Jake said, stepping closer. Emma looked up. There were shadows under her eyes, but something in her face had softened overnight, like a knot that had finally started to come loose. "I'm not alone," she said. "That's kind of the point." Jake lowered himself down onto the floor across from them, his knees popping the way they did more and more these days. He picked up a folder and started reading, letting his eyes adjust to Claire's careful handwriting, dates and names and numbers that told a story of quiet, dangerous work. "You did all this by yourself?" he asked. Claire nodded slowly. "Most nights I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma out there somewhere, wondering if she hated me." Her voice cracked a little, and she cleared her throat like she was pushing the feeling back down where it was easier to carry. "I told myself, if I finished the work faster, maybe I could come home sooner. Maybe I could make it worth what it cost her." "It wasn't worth anything," Emma said quietly. But there was no anger in it now, just tiredness and love tangled together. "I would have rather had you, even hiding, even scared. Just you." Claire reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I know that now. I think some part of me always knew it. But when Voss's people started asking questions, when I realized how far they'd go to protect what they were hiding, I panicked. I thought distance was the only thing standing between you and something I couldn't take back." Jake listened without interrupting, feeling the weight of it settle into the room. He thought of his own years on the road, the choices he had made to keep people away because it felt safer than the alternative. He understood Claire's fear better than he wanted to admit. They spent the morning working, spreading papers across the floor since the card table wasn't big enough, matching dates to shipments, names to companies that didn't quite exist the way they claimed to. Jake's knowledge of old delivery routes filled in gaps Claire hadn't been able to close on her own. Piece by piece, a picture came together, though it still had a hole in the middle of it, waiting to be filled. Around midday, Emma leaned her head against Jake's shoulder without seeming to think twice about it, the way a person leans on something sturdy without asking permission first. Jake went still for a moment, unsure what to do with the weight of her trust. Then, slowly, he let himself relax into it. Claire watched the two of them from across the table, something unreadable moving behind her tired eyes. "You've done more for her than you probably realize," she said to Jake. "I didn't do much," Jake said. "Just opened a door." "Sometimes that's everything," Claire said. Jake didn't answer that. He looked down at the papers in his hands instead, at Emma's shoulder pressed against his arm, at Claire watching them both like they belonged to something. A feeling rose up in his chest that he didn't have a name for, warm and unfamiliar, the kind of feeling he used to have a long time ago before people had taught him it wasn't safe to hold on to. He told himself it was nothing. Just gratitude for a job that was almost finished. Just relief that Emma had found her mother. But some quiet part of him, the part he usually kept locked away behind years of silence, whispered something different. It whispered that this felt like family. And Jake, sitting on that cabin floor surrounded by papers and two people who had somehow become his whole world in a matter of days, pushed that feeling down as hard as he could, because feelings like that had a way of getting taken from him before. Jake stopped moving, a paper halfway to the pile in front of him. Something had snagged in his mind, small and sharp, like a hook catching cloth. "Wait," he said. Emma lifted her head off his shoulder. "What is it?" There was a stop. Jake set the paper down slowly, his eyes fixed on nothing, seeing instead the old roads from years back. Off Route 9, past the quarry. A storage yard we used sometimes when a delivery ran late and we couldn't make the drop before dark. Small place. Rusted gate. Nobody remembered it because nobody used it more than a few times a year. Claire straightened. "A storage yard for what?" "Overflow," Jake said. "Whatever didn't fit on the truck, or whatever needed to sit a night before somebody picked it up." He looked at her. "You said Voss's people used fake supply routes to move things they didn't want found. If there was ever a place they used without thinking twice about it, that might be it. Nobody remembers a spot nobody uses." Claire's hands had gone still over the papers. "It's not in any of my records." "That's because it wouldn't be," Jake said. "It never had a name on paper, just a location riders knew by memory." Emma was already standing, pulling on her jacket. "Then we go." The drive took almost an hour, Jake's truck rattling over roads that had gone unpaved since he'd last seen them. Trees pressed close on both sides, branches scraping the windows here and there like fingers. Marcus had wanted to come, but somebody had to stay with the papers, so it was just the three of them. Jake behind the wheel, Emma up front beside him, Claire in the back with her knees pulled up like she was bracing for something. The storage yard, when they found it, looked like it had been swallowed by the woods a long time ago. A chain-link fence sagged under years of vines. The gate hung open on one hinge, rusted through. Beyond it sat a row of old metal containers, the kind that used to haul motorcycle parts and supplies, paint peeling, faded numbers stenciled on the sides. "This is it," Jake said quietly, stepping out of the truck. "Some of these are ours, club containers." They walked between the rows, Jake running a hand along the metal, reading numbers under decades of rust. Emma stayed close to him, and Claire moved slower, scanning everything like she expected the ground itself to hold a secret. "Here," Jake said finally, stopping in front of a container near the back, half hidden behind a fallen tree. The number on the side matched something in his memory, though he couldn't have said exactly what. "This one was mine. My route." The lock was old, but it gave way easier than Jake expected, the metal weak with rust. He pulled the door open, and the hinges screamed against years of stillness. Inside, dust hung in the air, stirred up by the sudden movement. Old crates sat stacked against one wall, and against the other, half buried under a torn tarp, sat a motorcycle Jake recognized immediately, one of the club's old delivery bikes, forgotten and left to rot. Emma crouched beside it, pulling the tarp back further. "Jake," she said, her voice tight. "Look." Bolted underneath the seat, half hidden by rust and grime, was a small metal box, the kind used to keep tools dry on long rides. Jake knelt down and worked it loose with his hands, his fingers remembering movements from years ago without needing to be told how. Inside the box were papers, folded tight and yellowed with age, along with a small drive wrapped in plastic. Claire took the papers with shaking hands, scanning them fast, her breath catching. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the missing piece. Dates, signatures, everything Voss tried to bury." Emma let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest for months. "We found it." Jake stood slowly, feeling something loosen in his own chest, too, something that had been tight for a long time. He looked at Emma, then at Claire, and for a moment, none of them said anything at all. Then, far off through the trees came the low sound of an engine. Jake's head turned toward the sound, every old instinct in his body sharpening at once. "Someone's coming," he said quietly, "and it's not one of ours." Jake grabbed the metal box and shoved it into Emma's arms. "Go, now!" They ran between the rows of containers, the engine sound growing louder, tires crunching over gravel somewhere beyond the tree line. Claire stumbled once, and Jake caught her arm without slowing down, pulling her toward the truck. Emma was already there, throwing the door open, clutching the box like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Jake started the engine before his door was even shut. Gravel sprayed behind them as he turned the truck hard onto the old dirt road, cutting through a gap in the trees he barely remembered existed. Behind them, headlights swept across the yard they had just left. Whoever it was, they were too late. Nobody spoke until the storage yard was far behind them, swallowed back into the woods. "They don't know what we found," Claire finally said, her voice shaking but steady underneath. "They were just checking the site. Routine, that's all." "Maybe," Jake said, both hands tight on the wheel. "Doesn't matter now. We have what we need." For the first time in weeks, something like relief settled over the three of them. Emma leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes, the metal box still held tight against her chest. Jake glanced at her in the mirror and felt a small, unfamiliar warmth spread through him. This was almost over. He could feel it. They drove straight through the night to the county courthouse, where an old contact of Marcus's, a federal investigator named Diane Okafor, agreed to meet them before sunrise. She was sharp-eyed and quiet, the kind of person who didn't waste words. She laid the documents across a folding table in a small back office and went through them page by page, her expression unreadable. "This is strong," she said finally. "Dates, signatures, falsified shipment records. This alone could open a real investigation." She looked up at Claire. "But I need the financial trail to match. The drive, the one you said was in the box, that connects the money to Voss directly. Without it, his lawyers will call all of this circumstantial." Jake felt his chest loosen even further. "It's here," he said. "We have it." But when Claire reached into the box to hand over the small plastic-wrapped drive, her hand stopped. The drive was gone. For a moment, nobody moved. "It was here," Claire said, her voice rising, fingers digging frantically through the folded papers, the torn edges of the tarp fragment they'd grabbed along with it. "I saw it. I held it in my hand back at the yard." Emma was already checking the floor of the truck outside, checking every pocket, every fold of the blanket they'd wrapped around the box for the drive. "It's not here," she said. Panic edged into her voice. "Jake, it's not here." Jake stood frozen, his mind racing back through every second since he'd pulled the box loose from under that seat. He remembered handing it to Emma. He remembered the run through the containers. He remembered the truck door slamming shut. Somewhere between the container and this room, the one piece of evidence that tied everything to Voss directly had slipped away. "I had it," Jake said quietly. "I had it in my hands." "It's not your fault," Emma said, stepping toward him, but Jake was already shaking his head. "I've spent my whole life keeping track of small things," he said, his voice low and hard. "Cargo, routes, Every bolt on every bike. I don't lose things." He looked at the empty space in the box where the drive should have been. "I lost this." Diane Okafor closed the folder gently. "We can still push forward with what we have. It just won't be enough on its own." Jake wasn't listening anymore. He turned and walked out of the office without another word, ignoring Emma's voice calling after him through the hallway. Outside, the morning air was cold and gray, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges. He swung his leg over his motorcycle, started the engine, and pulled out onto the empty road alone, leaving the courthouse, Emma, and Claire behind him in the rearview mirror. The road stretched out gray and empty in front of Jake, the sun barely climbing over the tree line. He rode without a real place to go, just the feeling of the wind against his chest and the low growl of the engine underneath him. It was the only sound that made sense right now. He passed the old diner first, the one with the flickering sign that used to spell out EAT in red letters, though half of it had burned out years ago, so it just said AT. He used to stop there every Sunday morning back when the club still rode together as one. Marcus would order eggs, over easy, every single time. Jake would drink his coffee black and listen to the guys argue about nothing. It felt like a lifetime ago. He didn't stop. He just slowed down enough to look through the window and see it was empty. The chairs stacked on the tables, a closed sign hanging crooked in the door. He kept riding. The next place he passed was the bridge over Miller's Creek, where he used to sit alone at night after his wife left. Back then, the water had been the only thing that didn't ask him questions he couldn't answer. He pulled the bike onto the gravel shoulder and sat there for a long moment, staring down at the water moving slow and quiet beneath him. It hadn't changed. The world kept moving forward, and this bridge stayed exactly the same, patient and forgotten, just like he had been for years. Jake thought about all the times he told himself he didn't need anybody. He'd built a whole life around that idea, a garage full of machines that never talked back, never left, never broke a promise. Motorcycles didn't lie to you. They didn't disappear one day and leave a note on the counter. They didn't ask more of you than you had left to give. But somewhere in the last few weeks that had changed. He thought of Emma collapsed on his garage floor, scared and bleeding, refusing to let fear stop her from finding the truth. He thought about the way she looked at him like he mattered, like he was more than just an old biker with grease under his nails and regret behind his eyes. He thought about Claire's face when she finally held her daughter again, and how for one small moment he'd felt like he was part of something whole. And now he'd ruined it. By the time he reached his own garage, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. He parked the bike and sat there for a minute, just looking at the building. It looked the same as it always had. Same rusted tin roof. Same faded paint on the door. But it felt different now. Emptier. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, and the silence hit him harder than he expected. The motorcycles lined up against the wall looked the same as they always had, chrome catching the light, tires resting on the concrete. But none of it gave him the comfort it used to. He ran his hand along the handlebars of the old Harley he'd rebuilt years ago, the one he used to be so proud of. It felt cold under his palm. He sat down on the stool near his workbench, elbows on his knees, and let his head drop. That was when it hit him, clear and sharp, like a wrench falling and hitting concrete. He hadn't run because he was afraid of Voss, or the men in the trucks, or the danger waiting somewhere out in those woods. He'd faced danger before. He knew how to handle it. No, this was something else entirely. He'd run because for the first time in years, he had something to lose again. People who needed him. people who trusted him enough to let him in. And the thought of losing that, of failing them the way he believed he'd failed the case, terrified him more than any man with a gun ever could. He wasn't afraid of danger. He was afraid of caring again. Back at the courthouse, Emma stood outside in the cold morning air, watching the empty road where Jake's motorcycle had disappeared. Claire placed a hand on her shoulder, but Emma shook her head, jaw tight with determination. "He's not getting rid of me that easy," she said. "I didn't come this far to lose him, too." The drive to Jake's garage took 20 minutes, but to Emma it felt like hours. Claire drove while Emma stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. Neither of them spoke much. There wasn't much to say. Jake was gone. The case was falling apart without the missing evidence, and the only person who might know where to look wasn't answering his phone. "He's not going to be happy we're here without him," Claire said as she pulled into the gravel driveway. "I don't care," Emma said. "He left. That means we get to look." The garage door was unlocked, which surprised Emma. Maybe Jake never expected anyone to come back. Maybe he wanted to be found. She pushed the door open, and the smell of oil and metal hit her the same way it had that first stormy night, when she'd stumbled in here bleeding and scared, not knowing that this cold, quiet place would become the closest thing to safety she'd found in months. The motorcycles stood in their usual row, chrome dulled slightly with dust. Claire ran her hand along the seat of the nearest one, an old Harley with a faded eagle painted on the tank. "Where do we even start?" she asked. Emma looked around the garage, taking in every shelf, every toolbox, every crate stacked against the far wall. "He said his club used to work with Blackridge's old supply routes years ago. If there's anything left from that time, it would be somewhere he wouldn't think to look, somewhere he forgot about." They split up. Claire took the shelves along the back wall, pulling down old boxes filled with spare parts, rusted chains, and yellowed manuals. Emma moved toward the motorcycles themselves, running her fingers along the frames, checking under seats, opening small storage compartments built into the sides. Most of them were empty. A few held nothing but old rags or spare bolts. Then she reached the last motorcycle in the row, the one closest to the wall. It was different from the others. Older, with dull black paint and a long crack running down one side of the gas tank. This one looked like it hadn't been ridden in years. Dust coated the seat in a thick layer. "Claire," Emma called, "whose bike is this?" Claire walked over, wiping her hands on her jeans. She studied the old motorcycle for a long moment, tilting her head. "I think that might be one from the club's early days. Jake mentioned once that this was the bike he rode when he first joined, before he became road captain." Emma crouched down beside it, running her hand along the underside of the frame. There, tucked beneath the seat, she found a small metal compartment she hadn't noticed before. It was built into the frame itself, hidden unless you knew exactly where to look. The latch was rusted shut. "Help me with this," Emma said. Claire knelt beside her, and together they worked the latch loose, prying at the rusted metal until it finally gave way with a creak. Emma reached inside, her fingers brushing against something cold and solid. She pulled out a small metal box, dented and scratched, but sealed tight. Her hands were shaking as she held it up to the light. "Claire, look." Claire's eyes went wide. She took the box from Emma's hands and turned it over slowly, studying every side. There was a symbol stamped into the lid, faded but still visible. It matched the Blackridge shipping logo from the old photographs. "This has to be it," Claire whispered. "This has to be the missing piece." Emma's heart pounded as Claire worked the small latch on the box open. Inside were folded papers, brittle with age, along with a small drive wrapped in plastic. Claire lifted the papers carefully, scanning the first page. "These are shipment records," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "Dates, routes, signatures. This is exactly what we needed to complete the case." Emma sat back on her heels, staring at the old motorcycle that had been sitting in this garage for years, untouched, forgotten. Jake had been carrying the answer the entire time, without even knowing it. "He didn't lose it," Emma said quietly. "He protected it, all this time." Emma found him 3 hours later, parked at a rest stop off Route 9, the kind of place with a single gas pump and a diner sign missing half its letters. His motorcycle sat under a flickering light, and Jake sat on the curb beside it, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. She had made Claire stop the car the second she spotted the bike. Her heart had been pounding the whole drive, but now, standing a few feet away from him, all she felt was relief. "You're hard to find," Emma said. Jake looked up. His eyes were tired, rimmed red like he hadn't slept. "Wasn't trying to be found? Well, too bad." Emma walked closer and sat down on the curb next to him, not waiting for permission. "We found it, Jake?" He turned his head slightly. "Found what?" "The evidence. The missing piece." She pulled the small metal box from her jacket pocket, the one she'd insisted on carrying herself the whole drive, like it might disappear if she let it out of her sight. "It was in your old bike, the black one in the back of the garage, hidden in a compartment under the seat." Jake stared at the box like it was something dangerous. "That's not possible." "It's very possible. Claire already looked through it. Shipment records, dates, signatures, everything the case needed." Emma held it out to him, but he didn't take it. His hands stayed folded between his knees, like he was afraid to touch it. "That bike's been sitting in that garage for almost 20 years, Jake said, his voice low and rough. "I rode it before I was road captain, before everything happened with Marcus, before I stopped trusting anybody in that club." He shook his head. "If that evidence was in there, that means somebody used my bike to hide it. Somebody used me." "No," Emma said firmly. "Somebody used your bike because they knew you'd protect it. Don't you see the difference?" Jake let out a hard breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I don't see anything except 20 years of carrying around a problem I didn't even know I had. I thought I lost that evidence, Emma. I thought I failed everybody because something went missing on my watch. Turns out I've been sitting on it the whole time and didn't even know." "That's not failing," Emma said. "That's the opposite of failing. How do you figure that?" Emma turned so she was facing him fully. The gas station light buzzed above them, casting a pale yellow glow across his face, making him look older and more tired than she'd ever seen him. "Because you kept it safe without even trying. You didn't lose that evidence, Jake. You protected it, same as you protected me, same as you've probably been protecting people your whole life, even when you didn't know you were doing it." Jake shook his head again, but slower this time, like the words were sinking in even though he didn't want them to. "I'm not a protector, Emma. I'm a guy who rides bikes and fixes engines. That's all I ever wanted to be." "That's a lie and you know it." Emma's voice cracked a little, but she pushed through it. "You didn't have to open that garage door the night I broke in. You could have called the cops. You could have kicked me out. Instead, you patched me up and let me stay. You didn't have to help me find my mom. You didn't have to risk your own club, your own name, chasing down some rich company's secrets. But you did. Because that's who you are, Jake, whether you believe it or not." Jake was quiet for a long moment. The wind picked up, rustling the trees at the edge of the parking lot. Somewhere down the highway, a truck rumbled past, its headlights sweeping briefly across them before disappearing into the dark. "I've spent years telling myself I'm better off alone," Jake finally said. Told myself I didn't need people depending on me. Didn't want the responsibility of somebody else's trust. But you already have it, Emma said softly. Whether you wanted it or not. You have mine. You have my mom's. Probably half your old clubs too, if you'd let them back in. Jake looked at her for a long time, something shifting behind his tired eyes. Finally, he stood, brushing off his jeans, and glanced at his motorcycle parked under the flickering light. Guess I better get that bike back home then, he said quietly. Sounds like it's got somewhere to be. The Federal Building downtown had never seen a crowd quite like this one. Jake walked through the front doors, wearing his leather vest, the patches worn soft from years of rain and road dust. Emma walked beside him, the metal box held tight in both hands. Claire followed close, a folder of documents tucked under her arm, her face pale but steady. Marcus brought up the rear, standing tall in a way Jake hadn't seen from him in 20 years. The receptionist looked at them like she wasn't sure what to make of the group. A Hell's Angel, a young woman, a nervous-looking researcher, and an older biker with graying hair. But when Claire said the name Blackridge Industries, the woman's eyes went wide, and she picked up the phone without asking any more questions. They were led to a conference room with gray walls and a long table. 2 agents from the State Attorney General's office sat waiting, along with a woman named Detective Reyes, who had been quietly investigating Blackridge for months without enough proof to move forward. "Let's see what you got," Reyes said, folding her hands on the table. Claire went first. She laid out her original research, spreading photographs and shipment logs across the table like a map of buried secrets. She explained how she had discovered the company was using outdated delivery routes to move hidden documents alongside legitimate cargo. Routes nobody thought to check anymore. Routes tied to old motorcycle clubs that used to run supply deliveries decades ago. "That's where I come in," Jake said. Every eye in the room turned to him. He set the metal box on the table and opened it carefully, the way a man opens something he still doesn't quite believe is real. Inside were the shipment records Emma had found, along with signatures, dates, and delivery confirmations that matched Claire's research almost perfectly. "Back when I rode with my club," Jake said, "we used to run deliveries for companies looking to save money on freight. Blackridge was one of them. We didn't know what we were carrying half the time, just boxes, sealed and stamped, going from one warehouse to another." He tapped the edge of the box. But somebody figured out those routes were the perfect place to hide things they didn't want found. Falsified reports, chemical dumping records, cover-ups going back years. Marcus leaned forward. "I found out what was happening a long time ago. That's why I helped Claire disappear. I knew if the wrong people found out what she'd uncovered, they wouldn't just come after her. They'd come after anyone connected to those old routes." He looked at Jake. "Including you." Jake nodded slowly, the pieces finally settling into place after all these years. Detective Reyes studied the documents for a long moment, flipping through pages, matching dates against the file already open on her laptop. Her eyebrows rose higher with every page. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is everything we needed." She looked up at Claire. "Your research was right. All of it. We just didn't have the last piece connecting the delivery system to the falsified records." "You have it now," Emma said. Reyes closed her laptop and looked around the table at all 4 of them. "Do you understand what this means? With this evidence, we can move on Richard Voss immediately. Fraud, conspiracy, obstruction. This isn't just enough to open a case. This is enough to end his career and put him away." Claire's hands trembled as she pressed them against the table, steadying herself. 8 months of hiding, 8 months of fear, 8 months of missing her daughter. And finally, someone was saying the words she needed to hear. "Thank you," Claire whispered. "Don't thank me," Reyes said. "Thank the people who carried this evidence when they didn't even know what they were protecting." Emma reached over and took Jake's hand, giving it a small squeeze. He didn't pull away. Within the hour, agents were dispatched to secure Blackridge's corporate offices. Warrants were signed. Files were seized. Richard Voss, the man who had spent years hiding behind money and threats, was brought in for questioning before the sun went down that same day. For the first time in 8 months, Claire Brooks was no longer running. For the first time in 20 years, Jake Dawson understood that the past he thought he failed had actually protected the truth all along. And for the first time since she started searching, Emma Brooks finally had her answer. Her mother was safe. The truth was out. And justice, slow as it had been, was finally arriving. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than Jake was used to. Not the heavy silence of a man alone. This was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes, when the air feels lighter and the world feels like it can breathe again. Jake's truck rumbled down the long gravel road that led to his house, the same road he had driven 1,000 times alone. Tonight, Emma sat in the passenger seat, her head leaning against the window, watching the trees blur past. Claire sat in the back, her folder of documents finally empty, finally handed over to people who could do something with the truth. When Jake pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered on, the motion sensor catching their arrival. The house looked the same as it always had. Small, plain, a little worn around the edges. But something about it felt different tonight. "This is it," Jake said, cutting the engine. "Not much to look at?" "It's perfect," Emma said, already opening her door. Inside, Jake flipped on the lights, and the garage smelled like it always did. Oil and metal and old leather. But there was something else in the air now, too. Voices. Laughter. The sound of people who were not afraid anymore. Claire wandered through the living room, running her fingers along the edge of an old bookshelf. "You built all this yourself?" "Most of it," Jake said, setting his keys on the counter. "Had a lot of time on my hands over the years." "It shows," Claire said. "It feels like a home, a real one." Jake wasn't sure what to say to that, so he did what he always did when he felt something he couldn't name. He went to the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee. Emma settled onto the old couch, pulling her knees up to her chest the way she used to when she was a little girl hiding from thunderstorms. Claire sat beside her, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Being together was enough. Jake brought out 3 mugs, chipped and mismatched, the kind of mugs a man collects over decades without ever meaning to. He set them down on the coffee table and lowered himself into the old recliner across from the couch, the one that still had the shape of his body worn into the cushion from years of sitting there alone. "Feels strange," Jake admitted, wrapping his hands around his mug. "Having people in this house." "Good strange?" Emma asked. Jake thought about it. Really thought about it. "Yeah," he said. "Good strange." Claire smiled, tired but genuine. "I don't know how to thank you, Jake, for everything, for finding her, for helping me." "You don't have to thank me," Jake said. "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," Claire said. "That's exactly why I'm thanking you." The conversation drifted easily after that, the way conversation does between people who have been through something hard together. They talked about small things, Emma's plans for the future, Claire's hope of finally publishing the truth about Blackridge, Jake's garage and the motorcycles he still had left to fix. Outside, the night settled in deep and quiet, but inside Jake's house, the lamps stayed on, and the voices kept going long past the hour Jake usually went to bed. At some point, Claire excused herself, saying she needed rest after months of running and hiding. Jake showed her to the spare room down the hall, one he hadn't used in years. She thanked him again before closing the door. That left Jake and Emma sitting in the living room, the coffee gone cold in their mugs. Emma looked at him for a long moment, the same way she had looked at him that first night in the garage, scared and searching for something to hold on to. "Jake," she said quietly, "can I tell you something?" "Course." "When I broke into your garage that night, I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't have anyone." She paused, her voice growing steadier. "But you didn't turn me away. You could have. Most people would have. But you didn't." Jake stayed quiet, letting her speak. "You became the family I needed," Emma said. "When I had nowhere else to go, you were the one who stayed." Jake felt something tighten in his chest, something he hadn't let himself feel in a long, long time. He thought about all the years he spent believing he didn't deserve a family. All the years he spent alone in this house, telling himself it was easier that way. He looked at Emma, and for the first time, he let himself believe it. "I guess I did," Jake said quietly. "I guess I am." Spring came slow to Jake's stretch of road, but when it came, it brought more than warm air and green leaves. It brought people. The garage looked different now. Jake had knocked down the back wall and built it out another 20 feet, adding extra bays and a row of workbenches he'd built himself from old barnwood. A hand-painted sign hung above the door, letters carved by Marcus during a long weekend when the two of them had finally sat down and talked through years of silence. "Dawson's Garage, all welcome." That was it. Simple. No explanation needed. On a Saturday morning in April, Jake stood in the doorway with a cup of coffee in his hand, watching the lot fill up. A pickup truck rolled in first, an old Army veteran named Harold climbing out slow, favoring his bad knee. Harold had lost his leg below the knee in a place he didn't talk about, and he'd spent 3 years after that barely leaving his house. Now he came every Saturday to work on a 1978 Triumph he was restoring piece by piece. "Morning, Jake," Harold called out, already reaching for his tools. "Morning," Jake said. "Bay 3's open." Behind Harold came a group of teenagers on bicycles, kids from the housing development a few miles down the road. Jake had met the oldest one, a lanky 16-year-old named Tyrell, hanging around the gas station looking for trouble because there was nothing better to do. Jake had offered him a job sweeping floors. Tyrell had shown up the next day, and the day after that, and now he could change oil and true a wheel better than some men twice his age. "You're late," Jake told him, though there was no bite in it. "Traffic," Tyrell said, grinning, even though the only traffic on that road was cows. By 9 o'clock, the garage was full of noise, wrenches clinking against metal, someone's radio playing classic rock too loud, laughter drifting between the bays. Emma had set up a small table near the entrance with a coffee pot and a box of donuts, and she greeted each person by name as they walked in, jotting notes in a spiral notebook for the non-profit she'd started, the one that helped families find loved ones who had gone missing the way her mother once had. Claire came by most weekends too, usually with a stack of newspapers under her arm. Her articles about Blackridge Industries had run in 3 major papers now, and Richard Voss and the others responsible were finally facing the consequences they'd spent years avoiding. But Claire never talked much about that here. Here, she just poured coffee and listened to old bikers tell stories about roads they used to ride. Marcus leaned against Jake's workbench, watching the crowd with a look of quiet satisfaction. "Never thought I'd see this place full of people," Marcus said. "Used to be I couldn't get you to answer your phone." "Things change," Jake said. "They do," Marcus agreed. "Good thing you let them." Jake watched Harold laughing with Tyrell over a stuck bolt, watched Emma refilling coffee cups with the same steady hands, that had once shaken so badly she could barely hold a photograph. He watched a woman named Sandra, a widow from 2 towns over, carefully sanding down a fuel tank, her face calm in a way it hadn't been the first day she showed up, still wearing her husband's old riding jacket because it was the only thing that made her feel close to him. They all had their reasons for coming: loneliness, grief, boredom, a need to build something with their hands when everything else in their lives felt broken. Jake understood every one of those reasons better than anyone because he had lived inside them for years. The garage had once been the one place Jake let himself hide from the world. A place with a locked door and no room for anyone else. Now the door stood open from morning until dusk, and the only thing that filled the space more than motorcycle parts was people. Jake set his coffee mug down on the workbench and looked around at all of it. The noise, the mess, the laughter bouncing off the walls he'd built with his own 2 hands. He thought about the night Emma had crawled through his side door, bleeding and scared, begging him not to call anyone. He thought about how certain he'd been that his life was better off small and quiet and empty. He'd been wrong. The garage that once represented everything he'd lost had become the place where people came to find what they were missing. Hope, purpose, family. Jake picked up a wrench and walked toward Harold's Bay, ready to get his hands dirty. "Bay 3's got a leak," Harold called out, and Jake set down his mug for good, crossing the concrete floor toward the old veteran's Triumph. Before he got there, though, Emma stepped up on an overturned crate near her coffee table and clapped her hands twice. The sound cut through the noise of the garage. Wrenches paused mid-turn. The radio got turned down. Heads turned toward her. "Sorry to interrupt," Emma said, her voice a little shaky at first, then steadier. "I just wanted to say something before we all get back to work." Jake leaned against a workbench, arms crossed, watching her. She looked so different from the girl who had collapsed on his garage floor almost a year ago. Her hair was pulled back, neat. Her hands didn't shake anymore. But there was still that same fire in her eyes, the one that had kept her searching for her mother even when everyone told her to stop. "Some of you know my story," Emma said. "My mom disappeared for 8 months. I thought she was dead. I spent that whole time running, scared, not knowing who to trust. And the only reason I'm standing here today is because a stranger let me into his garage instead of calling the police." A few people chuckled. Jake felt his ears go warm. "That's why I started Finding Home," Emma continued. "It's a nonprofit. We help families search for people who've gone missing. Sometimes it's a parent. Sometimes it's a kid who ran away. Sometimes it's someone hiding because they're scared, just like my mom was. We've helped 14 families since January. 14! That number used to be 0, and it only became something because one person decided to help instead of turning away." Claire stood near the coffee table, her stack of newspapers tucked under one arm. She caught Emma's eye and gave her a small nod, the kind only a mother could give. "I want to say something too," Claire said, stepping forward. Her voice was quieter than Emma's, but it carried. "I spent 8 months hiding from my own daughter because I was scared. Scared of the people at Blackridge, scared of what they'd do if they found her. I thought I was protecting her by staying away. But I was wrong. I was just letting fear make my choices for me." She looked around the garage at the faces watching her. Harold, Terrell, Sandra with her sanding block still in hand. "When I finally told the truth, when I finally let people help me instead of doing it all alone, that's when things changed. The articles got published. The people responsible are finally facing what they did. None of that happens if I stay quiet. None of it happens if Jake doesn't open his door for my daughter." Claire held up one of the newspapers, the headline about Blackridge Industries printed in bold letters across the top. "If you're facing something unfair, something that feels too big to fight, don't do it alone," she said. "Find someone. Tell someone. That's the only way anything ever changes. The garage stayed quiet for a moment. Even the radio seemed to hold its breath. Then Sandra spoke up from her corner, her sanding block still resting against the fuel tank. "That's why I keep coming back here," she said. "Everybody in this town knew my husband was gone. Nobody knew what to say to me. But Jake never asked me to explain myself. He just handed me a rag and pointed me toward a bike that needed work." Tyrell nodded along, wiping grease off his hands with a shop towel. "Same for me. I was headed nowhere fast. Jake gave me something to do with my hands instead of my fists." Jake shifted uncomfortably under all the attention, but he didn't look away. He'd spent so many years believing he had nothing left to offer anyone. Now here they were, a garage full of broken people who had found something whole together. Emma stepped down from the crate and walked over to stand beside him. "One act of kindness," she said, loud enough for the whole garage to hear. "That's all it takes to change somebody's entire life. Jake didn't set out to save me. He just opened a door instead of calling the cops. And look what happened." She gestured around the room, at Harold's triumph, at Tyrell's grease-stained hands, at Sandra's husband's jacket, at Claire's newspapers, at all the people who had found their way here because someone, somewhere, had chosen kindness over fear. Jake looked around the garage, and for a moment, the noise faded away. He remembered that night a year ago. The thunder, the rain hitting the roof like fists, the sound of metal scraping against concrete that had made his blood run cold. He remembered grabbing his flashlight, his wrench, his heart pounding hard enough to hear it in his ears. He'd been sure, absolutely sure, that some fool was trying to steal one of his bikes. Maybe strip parts off the Triumph he'd spent 6 months restoring. He'd been ready to fight, ready to hurt somebody if he had to. Instead, he'd found a girl on his floor, bleeding, shaking, begging him not to call anyone. 20 years old and scared out of her mind, and something about the way she looked up at him, like he was the last person on earth who could help her, had cracked something open in his chest that he'd kept locked tight for years. He hadn't wanted her there. He remembered that clearly. He'd told himself he wasn't the man for this job. He fixed motorcycles. He didn't fix people. People left. People lied. People smiled at you for years and then vanished when things got hard. Or worse, turned on you when you needed them most. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, and he'd built his whole life around never learning it again. But Emma hadn't given him a choice. She'd collapsed right there on his garage floor, and something in him, some old instinct he thought had died a long time ago, had picked her up and carried her inside anyway. He looked at her now, standing next to him, her hand resting light on his arm like it belonged there. She wasn't shaking anymore. She wasn't running. She stood tall in front of a room full of people who respected her, who'd seen what she'd done, who understood what it cost her to get here. Jake thought about all the nights after that first one. The letter sewn into her backpack, the abandoned storage facility, the photograph that had shown him his own past staring back at him, proof that he'd been part of something bigger and darker than he'd ever known. He thought about Marcus, and the year he'd spent hating a man who'd actually been protecting him the whole time. He thought about the day he'd ridden away from all of it, sure he was nothing but a burden, sure that Emma and Claire were better off without an old biker dragging his regrets behind him like a busted muffler. He thought about coming back. Sandra's voice broke through his memories, laughing at something Tyrell had said, and Jake blinked, coming back to the present. The garage was full of sound again, real sound. Wrenches turning, the radio playing low, laughter bouncing off the concrete walls that used to hold nothing but silence, and the smell of oil. He thought about how empty this place used to be, How he used to come out here at 2 in the morning just to be near the bikes, because the quiet used to feel like peace, back before he understood that quiet and loneliness were two very different things wearing the same face. Emma nudged his arm gently, pulling him from his thoughts. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes searching his face the way they always did when she worried about him. "Yeah," Jake said, and he meant it. "Just thinking." "About what?" He shook his head slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "About how wrong I was that night." Emma tilted her head, waiting. "I thought somebody broke into my garage," Jake said. "Turns out you were the one who opened the door." Emma smiled, and for a second, Jake saw the little flicker of the scared girl she'd been, buried somewhere underneath all the strength she'd built since then. Then it was gone, replaced by the steady, sure young woman standing in front of him now. She squeezed his arm once, and then walked off to join her mother, who was laughing with Sandra near the coffee table, the newspaper still tucked under her arm like a badge of honor. Jake stayed where he was for a moment, arms crossed, watching them, watching all of them. Harold checking his triumph one more time. Terrell teasing Sandra about her sanding technique. Claire and Emma leaning close together, sharing some private joke that made them both laugh. He walked toward the open garage door, stepping out into the afternoon sun. Outside, Emma, Claire, and the others had gathered near the picnic table Jake had built last spring, laughing together, easy and warm, like they'd always belonged there. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story, and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.